Now, Elaine actually was born in Highland, Maryland, in western Howard County. And she came to Elkridge after wetting her feet as a teacher at a one-room school at Annapolis Rock. So she came ready for anything after her experiences, right? You had a pretty exciting start to your teaching career in this one-room schoolhouse. You want to describe what it was like?
You mean about the skunks?
The skunks, sure.
I started teaching the first year. I kind of dismissed because I taught half a year in Florence, and the next half I taught in Long Corner. And what caused all that commotion was they started a big school in Lisbon, and so they kept moving children from place to place. But here it was in October. I had just started, was 20 years old, and the supervisor was there, and I let the children go out for their recess. And along the side of the school was what we called a fence row, and it so happened that there was a hole down in the ground in the fence row. We had a pump with a big galvanized tub. So the children, the boys, filled the tub with water, took it down and poured it in the hole, and out came, I dare say, Mommy and Poppy, and I don't know how many little skunks. Well, one of the children picked up a stone, and he threw it, and it hit one of my students. And so what happened was, the first, second, and third grade teacher was the principal, and I had the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh. So that teacher took my student to the doctor's. The supervisor took over her first, second, and third grade, and I sent all my boys home. And I thought, I don't think my career is going to last very long. I'll be 1 month and getting in a scrape like that.
Now, you also talked about the doctor and the nurse coming to give shots and the dentist coming to pull teeth right in the room there?
Yes. Then after the first year, I went to Annapolis Rock, and that was really, I wouldn't take $1 million for my experience those 4 years. The school had a potbelly stove. I had never made a fire in a stove in my life, and the coldest days, the fire went out. On the north side of the school were 6 big windows, and they had the shades, and it wasn't anything to see the shades flapping. And sometimes we had soup on the top of the stove so that at lunchtime they could have some hot soup. But it was back when we had the nurse come and the dentist. And one day when the nurse came, she took your temperature and did all kinds of things. And she said to me, she said, "Are there any little children near the school?" And I didn't know. And so one of my 7th grade girls said, "Yes, there's a young couple, probably a mile away, had a new little baby." And so the nurse, her name was Miss Sittler. And so she said, well, she was going for lunch, and for my little 7th grade girl to go and ask the mother to bring the baby in to the school. So, after a little bit, I let another 7th grade girl. So the 2 7th grade girls went, and I looked, and here came the 7th grade girls with the baby. The mother wasn't with them. And so it was time for lunch to be over, and I thought, gee whiz, I just can't let the kids sit here and not have anything to do. So I thought, well, spelling was about as easy a thing to get into because I could stop anytime if a nurse came. So here I was with the baby in one arm and the spelling book in the other. The spelling words.
You also had a story about the boys going trapping, and they only want the shoes.
Yeah. The boys all went trapping. And naturally, when they got their animals, they tromped their pelts with the shoes that they had on. And so when they came to school the next day, they had the same shoes on. And if it was cold, we would sit up close, and the boys would stick their shoes up on the little rail around the stove. And I'll tell you, I said back off, because it was not a good smell.
Now, a lot of these kids were pretty poor. You were describing what some of them would bring for lunch.
Oh, it wasn't good. I only had about 5 or 6 families in the school, so they all had big families. And I did not know this until a student of mine, he's grown now, and I got an article in the newspaper that he had written about this, and I really did not know it until then. But this little girl, they had brought their lunches in syrup buckets, and I noticed when she would eat, she'd put her little head over and she'd pull her hand up real quick and put it back. And I found out that she brought mashed potato and lard sandwiches. And I didn't have any idea what she had.
So, what eventually brought you to Elkridge? And
Well-
when did you come here?
Well, I left Annapolis Rock. I was there for 4 years. And then I came to Savage, and Helen was at Savage the same time I was. And that was, can I tell one story about at Savage? This little boy was quite a character. And at that time, I thought he was bad, but not now. He wasn't really bad. He was just a little mischievous. So I put him next to me so that I could grab him every once in a while. Well, one day, I smelled something that smelled like smoke. And I saw Elmer jumping up and down. He said, "Miss Harding, I'm on fire." And I thought, oh my golly. And so his pocket was on fire, so I squashed the pocket and put the fire out. So what had happened, the boys had non-safety matches in their pockets. And they took a little round nut, and they had 2 bolts that would screw into that nut. They broke the head of the match off and put it in there, and then they screwed it, and they threw it down, and it went off like a torpedo. Now that was big doings back then. And so I went to the principal, and I said, "Miss Debbie," and I told her. So she got a quart jar, and she went through the school. She collected a quart jar full of matches. And thank goodness, Elmer had on, it was in the winter time, and Elmer had on nice heavy underwear. If he hadn't, he'd have had a burn. And I felt like giving him a burn.
So what brought you to Elkridge?
Well, and so then I was at Savage for 10 years, and then I guess the supervisor, somebody, it was their idea, because back then we teachers, I guess we listened. We didn't do much thinking. We did what we were told to do. And so I came to Elkridge, and Mr. Clapper was the principal. And when I came, I was to teach the 2nd grade. And Blanche Burgess came that year, and she was to teach the 2nd grade. So there was a dilemma. And Blanche was determined she was going to teach the 2nd grade. And I wanted to be determined, but I thought, well, if this is where I'm going to spend my life for a while, I better cooperate. So I told Mr. Clapper, I said, okay, I'll take the 4th. And I was glad I had to, because I loved the 4th after that.
So were things much tamer here in Elkridge?
Yes, well, I guess I had so many experiences that it would have taken a lot to get me all up in the turmoil. But I loved Elkridge. It was great. And I had Sally. You see what? That's why Sally is just so good.
Now you had a story about taking the kids on a field trip to the B&O Museum.
Yes. We had the opportunity of taking the children on day trips. And so I went into the B&O Museum, and there were no buses there that day, and there might have been a few people. But when I got there, I told the youngsters, I said, you can go on your own, but don't get too far away in case I want you. So all of a sudden, see if these names ring a bell. Gail Lang and Judy Harmon and Linda Litchfield, Jay Adcock. I think they were the 4 that came getting me. Miss Harding, come quick. Well, I didn't know what I was going to come quick about, but I went, and here was one of the cars that had, if you weren't married, get in the car and sit down, and you would get married. So that was what those girls were very anxious about. So I did after a while.
Now there were a couple of other stories you had about Elkridge.
Yes, I was very much interested in the Junior Red Cross. And I did not do a lot of teaching, book learning, in the month of December. But I hope that I taught a lot of what it takes to make good little citizens, because we made coloring books. We took toilet paper rolls and filled them with candy and wrapped them all up in pretty paper and tied ribbons around them. We collected oranges, and I was married at the time, and my husband was military, and so he took me over to Fort Meade to the hospital, and I went up in the ward where the guys were, and I found out how many of the guys that were there were expected to be there over Christmas. And so I got all their names and their addresses, and I came back and I gave them to the youngsters, and they all sent cards and wrote letters to them. And then, you couldn't do this now, on the first day of December, I got my Bible and I opened up to the Christmas story, and the first day of December, we learned the first verse of the Christmas story. The next day, we recited it, and we learned the second verse. The next day, we recited the first and second and learned the third. And by Christmas, they all had memorized the Christmas story. And it was a fun time. And then after Christmas, I just had to double up. But I felt like it was worse, because the children learned a lot of things that, and I've kept in touch with a lot of my kiddies, and I've loved them a lot, and they've all been pretty good ones. And,
Great. Well, thank you.
Well, I want to tell one more thing. This was the year that I retired, and I could do things then. I could show a little partiality, and the next year, the parents, if they thought about it, they couldn't fuss because I wasn't there. But my hubby was at Walter Reed. He was in the hospital, and he was going to have surgery. It was simple surgery. But I knew I would be thinking about him the night before, so I had 6 little girls spend the night with me. It was Betty Shipley, Kathy Osborne, Karen Brown, Jody Cobb, Kathleen Wank, I can't think of the other one. And so I had them for dinner. And so after we ate dinner, I thought, well, we'll have a little fun. And I got a Coke bottle, and we played spin the bottle. And so when the bottle came to me one time, I thought, golly, what can I do? And I said, go out in the front yard and holler, I'm a nut. Well, whoever it was, I think it was Jody Cobb, because Jody she was a good little gal, but she was funny. And out she went, and she screamed. You could hear her all over the place. But that was fun. Then after that, every time the bottle pointed to somebody, they all had to go out in the yard and shout, I'm a nut.
You kept your mind off your husband that way.
Yeah, yeah.